In this video, we're going to check out ghost towns in central and eastern Montana. A lot of these towns are on the Milwaukee Road, which was abandoned in 1980. We're going to see grain elevators, churches, stores, and a whole bunch more. So let's begin. Our first stop is Barber, Montana. It was founded in 1910. It was also a stop along the Milwaukee Railroad. By 1920, Barber had a post office, store, hotel, bank, and a church. Grace Lutheran Church is one of the landmarks in Barber. It was built in 1917 and it's been restored. There's also this bank vault in town and one other building. Everything else is on private property. Our next town is Buffalo, Montana. It was named after the American bison, which once roamed the area with vast herds. The town's post office was established in 1890. The Great Northern Railroad established a line through Buffalo. My favorite building in this town is the First State Bank. It's been abandoned since the Great Depression. And just up the road is the community hall. It doesn't look like it's been used in decades. To my surprise, the church is still in use. And there's the long abandoned two-story school, which is now situated on private property, but you can get right up to the fence. Our next stop is Carlyle, Montana. We're about 1.5 miles away from North Dakota. The town's population peaked at 221 in the 1940s. And it had a branch line from the Northern Pacific Railroad. All that's left is 2 grain elevators, the school, and a couple of abandoned houses. Our next stop is Castletown, Montana. As you can see, I'm doing these towns in alphabetical order. Castletown was established in the late 1800s during the silver boom. At its peak, it had 2,000 residents. The entire town is on private property, but you can see a lot of the stuff from the road. Most of the buildings are just ruins now. It once had 14 saloons and 7 brothels. The Cumberland mine closed in 1950, and that pretty much ended the town. Our next stop is Glentana, Montana. It was hit by a tornado a couple years ago, and that's probably why this building is missing its roof. We're only about 10 miles from the Saskatchewan border. I live in Saskatchewan. The town was once a station on the Great Northern Railroad's branch line. And it's also home to this amazing 2-story school. It hasn't been in use for decades, and the railroad left town a long time ago. Our next stop is Hammond, Montana. It was founded in 1881. It was a stop along the Northern Pacific Railroad. At its peak, it had several businesses, including hotels and saloons. Now there's just a couple buildings along the highway. and you can even make out video rentals on that sign. The other gas station is marked no trespassing, and it even has video surveillance. Our next stop is the Howard School, which is located just west of Forsyth, Montana. Children started attending the school in a log cabin in 1882, the year the Northern Pacific Railroad completed its line through the valley. In 1904, they replaced the log house with this school. Upstairs was where the teacher lived. In 1947, the school closed. It now operates as a community center. Our next stop is Ingomar, Montana. We are now officially in the middle of nowhere. This area is very remote. The Milwaukee Road was abandoned in 1980, and it affected the population of this town. It still has the old school. All over town you're going to see a bunch of these old abandoned homes. By the way, I'm so grateful that you folks like to watch these videos of ghost towns. I do trim as much of the videos as I can to make them as efficient and short as possible. I live in Shaunavon, Saskatchewan. Where are you watching from? And here is the Jersey Lily Bar and Cafe and the Bookman store. They're on the National Registry of Historic Buildings. And here's what looks like an engine from the Milwaukee Road. Hello. Next up is Ismay, Montana, also known as Joe, Montana. The railroad through town is still active. But once the highway was relocated, the population of this town declined. And Main Street has a few of these abandoned stores. As a fundraiser, this town briefly renamed itself Joe, Montana. He used to play football for the San Francisco football team. The town was established in 1907. And the community hall still marks itself as Joe, Montana. Next is Lennep, Montana. It is located at the foot of the Castle Mountains. But it also offers a view of what's called the Crazy Mountains. Lennep was also on the Milwaukee Road, which was abandoned decades ago. There's a general store that once housed a post office and a school. And the house beside the school is where the teacher lived. The Trinity Lutheran Church has now been restored. It was founded in 1891 and this church was built in 1914. Our next town is Lombard, Montana. The first thing you're going to be greeted by is this car that looks like it fell off the road. The road to get here isn't that easy for most vehicles. My minivan probably could have made it, but I rented a truck. The Milwaukee Road used to come through here, but it was abandoned in 1980. The BNSF still passes through here. The town was established in 1895. And it used to have a general store, a post office, school, and a hotel owned by Billy Key, a Chinese immigrant who also served as the town's mayor. The post office closed in 1957. There isn't much left, but you can still see the foundations of some of the buildings. Lombard was one of my favorite towns to visit. It's really peaceful here and very pretty. And there's another car that looks like it fell off the road, and it's been shot up over the years. This is what the road looks like, but it gets very steep in some places. Our next stop is Maudlow, Montana. This town was a stop on the Milwaukee Road, which was abandoned in 1980. It's hard to believe that was already 44 years ago. Today, Maudlow is a ghost town. Only a few structures remain, and they're all marked as no trespassing. So to respect the owner's wishes, I'm going to shoot from the road. If you're going to visit this town, I highly recommend you come from the south. Don't take any of the roads north of here. They were all closed. And on the way here, there was this lonely grain elevator in the middle of nowhere. There was a branch line that came this far north from Bozeman. Our next stop is Mildred, Montana. This town was established on the Milwaukee Road. However, the train still comes through town. It was also a stop on the Old Yellowstone Trail, a significant early 20th century automobile route, but it was rerouted and that affected the population of this town. It looks like someone has taken over the church and may be using it as a house. Someone put a new roof on this building. I couldn't find out what the peak population of this town was, but it does look like it possibly had as many as 200 people. And this is what the road through town looks like now. Our next stop is Moccasin, Montana. It was established in 1907 along the Milwaukee Road. But this part of the train is still in use. I think it's a BNSF line now. There's a handful of buildings right along Main Street, including the old Moccasin Bank. And it looks like this building may have been the general store at one time. And there's a really neat truck for sale in case you're looking for one. Right along the highway, there's this old gas station. Our next stop is Square Butte, Montana, the prettiest town on this trip. The first building is this abandoned cafe and bar. It's been closed for decades. This town is also along the Milwaukee Road. It's been abandoned since the 1960s, and to my surprise, the abandoned tracks are still here. In a lot of these small towns, people are really friendly and they look out for each other. While I was visiting, a gentleman who lived in the town his whole life came and told me a little bit more about the history. It's nice that the residents will come out and greet strangers. And just to the north of town is the old jailhouse. It's on the National History Registry, and it looks like there's someone still inside. Our next town is Vananda, Montana. I hope I pronounced that right. There was nobody to ask. It was established in 1908, and once again it was on the Milwaukee Road, which has been abandoned since 1980. This is also a town in the middle of nowhere. And the entire town is now marked as no trespassing, so to respect the owner's wishes, I'm shooting from the road. The 3-story school is one of the most famous abandoned buildings in the entire state. And finally, there's Westmore, Montana. Nobody lives here anymore. The train still passes through town, but the highway was rerouted, which probably contributed to becoming a ghost town. This house is the only building that was still intact. Because my video wasn't very good, I'll show you a photo I took. There's still foundations from some old buildings and a lot of collapsed buildings as well. The school closed in 1959 and the post office closed in 1940. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I thank you so much for joining me on this trip. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comment section below.